Thank you very much. All righty. The evolutionary advantages of mental illness. So what if those of us diagnosed with mental illness are not in fact, or do not in fact have a genetic mutation, but in fact an amazing evolutionary adaptation? What if mental illness, as Malcolm Gladwell says in his book, David and Goliath, is in fact a desirable disadvantage? And if that is the case, why don't we treat the mental illness, the symptoms and so forth, with therapy and medication, and then work to embrace, enhance, utilize, and celebrate the mental ableness? What would the impact be on a child if you could convince them that what they have is not simply a mental illness, it is in fact an amazing combination of mental illness and mental ableness, and that they're not broken, they were actually designed that way? I believe the positive impact would be incalculable. I myself do not believe I am broken. I have two mental illnesses. One is called major depressive disorder, better known as depression, and something called chronic suicidality, which is little known, which means for me and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu for problems large and small. A couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had three thoughts unbidden. One, I'd get it fixed. Two, I could buy a new one. Three, or I could just kill myself. It just bubbles up as an option all the time. I do believe, however, that that mental illness is the flip side of my mental ableness. My vivid imagination, creativity, my sense of humor, which has allowed me to make a living as a stand-up comedian and professional speaker for the last 33 years. And it's helped me in my personal life. And this is a story I've never told before to any audience anywhere. I believe when I was 12 years old that my sense of humor protected me, kept me from being a victim of child sexual abuse. At 12 years old, on paper, I was the ideal victim for a pedophile. I was 12. My dad died very young, so I had no strong male role model. My mom worked full-time, so I was something of a latchkey kid. And the linchpin was, I spent my afternoons and Saturdays at the YMCA, where they had a nest of pedophiles. Yeah, pedophiles, bumping into a pedophile is sort of like the idea behind real estate. It's location, location, location. And pedophiles are great networkers. They hire one another, promote one another, cover for one another. So the outgoing youth director, pedophile Steve, hired the incoming youth director, pedophile Wayne. And I'm in Wayne's office one day, and as my mother would say, apropos of nothing, just he and I, he said to me, "Frank, have you ever been involved in group masturbation?" I said, "Wayne, you know what? I never really pictured masturbation as a team sport. More of an individual sport like golf." And he laughed until he cried, and then he left me alone. So you could say that my sense of humor saved my behind. Literally. Yeah. And I gotta tell you, I know a lot of comedians. I must tell you, a disproportionate number of comedians that I know have a mental illness. There's a guy, unfortunately recently deceased, named Mike McDonald, a comic out of Canada. He said there are two kinds of comics: diagnosed, undiagnosed. Yeah, that's nature of the beast. And I gotta tell you, my best comedy students are the mentally ill. I taught a class designed for mentally ill people by a guy named David Grenier in Vancouver, British Columbia. Let's see, make sure I go. Revolutionary, that's the comedian. Yeah, sorry about that, I'm a little behind on my slides. I was afraid, like Glenn, it wasn't gonna fire. The class, I'm sorry, hold on. Oh, Palm Pilot. Yeah, keywords. Problem with this? I'm always downloading to the sink. Oh! The class is called Stand Up for Mental Health. It's for people who have a mental illness and they want to write and perform stand-up comedy based on their battles with mental illness. The idea to reduce the stigma. And you have to have a diagnosis to be a student, and you have to have a diagnosis to be the teacher. So it's part comedy class, part peer counseling session. It's amazing. And they were the funniest people. Stuff came out of their mouths, unedited, that was ready for prime time. I'll give you a couple examples. I was having coffee with a potential student named David Lynn. David Lynn was from Kentucky. I said, "David Lynn, tell me about yourself." She goes, "Well, I'm from Kentucky." No kidding. "And I've had 6 husbands. I only shot one of them, but that's another story." Whoa, write that down. Lisa, oh, by the way, last name's withheld, comedy coach, client confidentiality. Lisa came to me. She was dual diagnosed, alcoholism, depression. She'd just come from an AA meeting where the speaker had apparently mentioned Christopher Columbus. So she comes in. I go, what do you got, Lisa? She goes, well, I think Christopher Columbus was an alcoholic. Why do you think that? Well, his big idea, if you recall, was to sail east to get west. Doesn't that sound like something you'd come up with in a bar? And then he did it. And when he landed, like an alcoholic, he had no idea where he was. When he got back, like an alcoholic, he couldn't tell anybody where he'd been. And he got a woman to finance it twice. Ah, that gives me chills. That's so good. I had a woman named Camille. Her backstory, her mental health backstory was nightmarish. But again, because we're all diagnosed, you could share. She said, I went to see my psychiatrist. He asked if I was depressed. I said, yes. Having thoughts of suicide? Yes. Do you have a plan? She said, I have 5 plans. 5 plans? She goes, yeah. Do you want to hear them all or just the ones that involve you? It's dark, but it's funny, and there's not a syllable in there that doesn't move the narrative forward. My favorite was Tricia. Tricia came in. She goes, yeah, I got a joke. Last night, my boyfriend said to me, I want to break up. I said to him, why do you want to break up? He said, I want to see other people. I said, I'm bipolar. Give me a minute. Again, that's the way that came out of her mouth. No editing necessary. Go right into an act, go right on television. Sometimes I feel sorry for my neurotypical or neuronormal friends. Yes, I have a mental illness, but I also have this sort of batch of mental ableness, akin to superpowers, I believe. I mentioned the superpower thing to my sister, my darling little sister Jane, who battles anxiety and depression. She goes, superpowers, yeah. We're not the X-Men, we're the Xanax Men. Yeah, so I think I've got a list of people here who, oh, there you go, famous people with depression. These are rich, famous, and or notable people. 3 things I am not. But this is, and you can see there are creative, obviously, comedians, singers, politicians, and so forth. The Xanax Men. I decided that, and when I speak to kids in middle and high school, I suggest them they create a superhero avatar. DC comic or Marvel, some character that they really like, and then, sort of customize it to their situation. Because if you think about it, most superheroes have issues. Had something tragic happen in their lives. Superman was put into a capsule, fired into space, and his home planet blew up. I'm guessing he has a little separation anxiety. Batman saw his folks going down the street when he was a child. A little PTSD. Spider-Man, bitten by a radioactive spider. Okay, I'm not saying they're all equally tragic, but they all have issues. So I figured out who my superhero avatar would be. I said to my wife, but guess who it is? I said, by day, I'm mild-mannered, easygoing, laid back, until I get mad. She goes, you're the Incredible Hulk. I go, yeah, but see, I have to customize it a bit. So it's mild-mannered, laid back, until I get depressed and really blue, and then I'm the Incredible Sulk. Thank you. Sulk. Oh, bipolar. I really do have it written on my hand. Let's talk about bipolar for a second. Bipolar, I think, should be called tripolar, by the way, because you have your manic, which is sleepless for nights on end, psychotic behavior, hallucinations, delusions, paranoid rage. And you have your depressive, which is loss of energy, hopelessness, thoughts of suicide. But in the middle, are you aware? There's a phase called hypomania, an amazingly productive phase. Energetic, enthusiastic, euphoric, creative, charismatic, natural leader, lofty goals, takes inspired risks that when they work out seem brilliant. Nowadays, what they do clinically is they medicate people to normal or just a little into the depressive. Why not hold them at a safe altitude in that band of hypomania? I'll give you the poster boy for this. This is, you guys know Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel? Johnny Manziel, undiagnosed bipolar. He was just diagnosed recently, but in his young life, he was the youngest person ever to win the only freshman ever to win the Heisman Trophy, quarterback of the year, AP All-American, and then, of course, he went to play in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns for 2 years. I believe because he used the things that he had when he was in the hypomanic phase, as you can see there. However, he was untreated, undiagnosed, and the only thing he did for treatment was alcohol. So this is what he did. This is the obviously the things that happen to you when you are in the depressive phase, and this is what happened to Johnny Manziel. Arrested and charged, suspended him for half the year, stopped by a policeman with his girlfriend, something about spousal abuse, picked up by the Dallas police. The good news is Johnny Manziel has been diagnosed. He is now in therapy, taking medication, in talks with the New England Patriots to resume his football career. And he's not alone in terms of famous people with bipolar disorder. All these folks, rich, famous, and or notable, have had bipolar. So here's my question. I mentioned that the people are not broken, they're made that way. For me, it comes down to this. If this, then that, what's the connection? If this, my mental ability, is just the flip side of that, my mental disability, what is the connection? I believe the connection is why, and I believe the why is found in evolution. 100,000 years ago, cavemen and women, anthropologists will tell you, the majority of them had bipolar disorder of necessity because their lives were governed by the movements of the sun and the seasons. So as spring approached and summer began to happen, they would come out and they have to gather and hunt in 3.5, 4 months what they're going to need for 8 months. So they would slip into the hypomanic phase. They were super hunters, super gatherers, and hypersexual. Because to keep the numbers up in the tribe, they had to have a lot of kids. By the way, to this day, one of the groups at most at risk for bipolar are women of a reproductive age. So all summer long, they would hunt, gather, and then, as the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, they would begin to slip into the depressive phase, not so much interested in sex, and they'd find a place to hunker down and hibernate and bear and keep the children alive until the summertime. So the question is, are there any other mental illnesses from, that date to that time period that were survival skills? OCD. You have to take the 4 months worth of hunting and gathering and store it in such a way that it'll sustain you for 8 months. Who better to be your quartermaster or supply sergeant than somebody who is obsessed with organization and cleaning rituals? Parasites, bugs, germs, no Purell hand sanitizer. Somebody in the tribe had to go, no, do not eat that. That's the person with OCD. It's a disability now. It was a survival skill back then. Kids with ADD, ADHD. Nowadays, we make fun of kids because you put them in a desk, chain them down, force them to look at a board for 6.5 hours, and wonder why they disrupt the class. It's because they're wired like the kids 100,000 years ago. Back then, though, somebody with ADD, nowadays we make fun if a kid's easily distracted. Squirrel! But back then, when everything and everybody could kill and or eat you, it was not funny. It was Velociraptor. That's a survival skill. So I would have the people with ADHD as my guards, the people that stood watch at night, or my security detail. I've always said I was going to open a security company called Tweaker Security, because they don't eat, they don't sleep, and they're paranoid. So who better to look after your stuff? So somebody with ADD who's hyper alert and always on guard for something would be ideal for a tribe like that. Finally, dyslexics. This is my favorite. Do you guys know dyslexics have better peripheral vision than ordinary humans? Yep. And ordinary humans, generally when they're looking, they're seeing whatever's in the frame directly ahead of them. They can see the rest, but they're not focused on anything but this. Dyslexics tend to focus on the whole, the panoramic. So, yeah, and they have the uncanny ability to spot the anomaly. What's wrong with the picture? So never play Where's Waldo with a dyslexic for money, because they'd be like, there. So I would have them, I assume they probably did. They were the scouts. They walked point as the tribe went from, like the winter grounds to the summer grounds, because they would pull up to a field, forest across here. Everybody else just sees a solid wall of bushes and trees. The dyslexic goes, you see right next to that oak tree? What looks like a bush? That's a guy covered in leaves and twigs with a spear. They're able to pick out the anomaly. All right, now, as in Glenn's slideshow, why should we care? What difference does that make nowadays? Here's what I think we should do with that information. We should change the IEP, the Individual Education Plan, for students with mental illness, to treat and minimize the mental illness and embrace, enhance, energize, and celebrate the mental ableness. You got a kid with OCD. Should have a curriculum that requires attention to detail and precision. STEM, science, technology, education, mathematics, perfect. Arts and humanities, forget it. Yeah. Flip the equation. The kid with dyslexia, forget STEM. Arts and humanities, fewer letters, fewer numbers, and multidimensional complex tasks. Why not play to their strengths? And the kid with ADD, I've got a friend named AJ, who is a professional trumpet player who taught public school, band in public school for a couple of years. He said, Frank, some of the kids with ADD, they were the best students I had. And bar none. The trouble was, I could tie them into a chair for 50 minutes, make them practice scales, but after 10 minutes, that next 40 minutes, they didn't get any better. So what he did was he bought an egg timer. And he said to the kid, look, 10 minutes, you're going to practice your scale till the egg timer goes off. When it went ding, he goes, okay, sit there for 10 minutes. Now you're going to practice that piece you're performing on Saturday till the timer goes off. Ding. Okay, now we're going to practice our breathing for 10 minutes. And he said the transformation was amazing because they are extremely capable just in short bursts. So bottom line is we are just now beginning to scratch the surface to figure out why it is our brains go wrong. Early research shows that it is probably because what we call mental illness today is actually, in fact, an amazing combination of mental illness and mental ableness. And by the way, I put those lists of famous people up there. You do not have to be mentally ill to be rich, famous, and or notable. But apparently, doesn't hurt. Thank you very much.